Welcome to this video, where we'll take a look at the two new modules by Blue Lantern Modules, FM Sinus Lab and DDK. FM Sinus Lab is a Buchla-style wavefolder with phase control, phase input with attenuator, and wavefold CV input. DDK is a dual decay module with two decay variable envelope generators, each with its own CV control for that decay, an envelope output for each channel, audio input, and audio output. So there's built-in VCAs in this. We also have this choke input, which applies a negative value to our VCA on output 2. Now I'm showing these two modules together because they work really well in tandem with creating West Coast synthesis patches to imitate the sound of a low-pass gate without actually using a low-pass gate. And I'll show how to patch that up when we get into DDK. First, I'll give a rundown of each of the modules, followed by some patch tips and then some music at the end. And let's get started with a rundown of the FM Sinus Lab Wavefolder. FM Sinus Lab is a 10 HP Buchla-style wavefolder. Though it doesn't fold to gnarly amounts, it is called FM Sinus Lab for a reason, because there's the two audio inputs that you use to basically frequency modulate each other. We'll start with the audio in A and the output. And I'm just feeding a sine wave into audio input A. So we can see it folds it. But not to gnarly screaming amounts, but that's where all these other inputs and controls come into play. We have our phase, which phase offsets our sine wave, which kind of acts as like a pulse width control, similar to symmetry or odd even in other wavefolders. We also have our phase for input B, which we could actually use to make some slight adjustments here, even when nothing's present. Just a little bit. In CVA, this is an attenuator knob for our CV input here, which controls this knob here. Now we could see how many times this folds our wave. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4.5. So not too many folds. But this is where audio input B, or the phase input, comes into play. I'm going to turn the attenuator all the way down here, and I'm going to plug our audio in to B. And I'm going to turn this up, and what it's going to do is act similar to this knob, where it is a level control that wavefolds our signal. And this actually pushes further than audio input A. And you can see our phase is still affecting audio input B. Now let's count how many times B folds as opposed to the 4.5 coming from audio input A. There's 1 fold, 2, 3, 4, 5. But then those outside harmonics are actually keep going. So let me try that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7. 7 full wavefolds with some little pulse width in there for where it cut off at 6. And then we could still phase control this, so we're really folded, and this won't do anything right now. Now what CV input B does is it offsets where this knob position is. We'll just plug an LFO into CVB. It controls our wavefold amount as set by this knob here, which is similar to CVA, which I'll now show you. except this is an attenuator for that signal, which offsets this knob position. Now where this module starts to get really cool is when you add in two audio signals to A and B. And it's also worth noting that audio input B is also our phase input for A. So to show you this, I'll just plug an LFO into B. And we can see that it's just changing our phase at that specific rate. But we unplug this and we see that it is receiving that signal and it's giving it what seems like the up and down of the audio signal, but it's actually just adjusting the phase of channel 1, which is how B can be a phase offset for A or a nice two audio in mixer if you want, or where they kind of frequency modulate each other. First, I'll just plug in another waveform from the same oscillator. I'll just put a saw wave in. That's nice and all, but what's even better is when we mix in from a second oscillator at the right tuning, we get nice Sega Genesis FM Mega Drive sounds. Now let's throw that LFO back in here. We'll get into more patches and musical things in just a minute with the Sinus Lab, but first we need to go over DDK. DDK is an 8 HP dual decay module meant to imitate the decay that comes in a low-pass gate, and you can easily apply this to either your filter or wavefolder to give you a very, very similar effect. First, we have our trigger input here, which I'm going to patch trigger into. And we're going to jump down to the VCA section here, and I'm going to patch my audio out from the wavefolder into the audio in on DDK. And let's take that output. And now let's jump to the top here where we have our decay knob that controls our decay time from near instantaneous to ringing out for fairly long. Yeah, that's pretty long. We'll take a look at how long that is in just a second here when we go over the envelope output here, because the envelope internally routes to our VCA here, obviously, but then we also get an output here. So for right now, I'm going to plug our envelope output into the oscilloscope, and we can take a look at these envelopes. See how incredibly long this decay goes at max here. Check this out. Now it's an exponential decay, So it's going to get pretty close there. It's still not at 0, and it's not going to get to 0 for quite a while. And you can see a jump there. So you could get up to, I want to say, a good minute of decay time here. Now it's exponential, so it's really quiet, but it's there. And now we'll check out the decay CV input and attenuator. So all the way down, this CV input is not doing anything. All the way up, it's turning at 100% our knob back and forth with a triangle wave LFO. Can go faster LFO speeds for something a little more rhythmic. Now this is dual decay, so there are 2 channels on this. So let's just switch over to channel 2. And actually, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take that audio output out and just leave our sine wave into the Wavefolder here. Now what I'm going to do is patch this envelope into our CVA here to give us our wavefolding. We could already hear it gives us more of a low pass gate sound to it. And that's because it's doing kind of the same thing. Having the wavefolding low or all the way down, it's giving us a closed VCA basically, or a closed filter. And turning it up, it's going to increase the harmonics of our sine wave as it shoots up. And then as the envelope drops, it's going to reduce the harmonics similar to what a filter does. So basically, it's doing the same thing, all with just this envelope output and the same envelope applied to our VCA. With this handy little decay here. And we additionally have this choke input here, which is a negative VCA that applies to our output. So if I say patch this LFO into the choke, it's going to apply to choking off our VCA. Now what's handy with this is if you have your first decay choking the second one, you could get much more rhythmic effects. I'm just going to dupe our trigger here and shoot that into the first one. Now it's choking, but we could choke it in a way that gives us a little bit more volume control as far as a little bit of attack. Or a weird kind of double attack. Now note, the choke does not affect this envelope out, it only applies to the VCA of channel 2. And that is DDK. And now let's take a listen to some music while I break down the patches. For these clicky parts at the moment, I have a triangle wave going into A and a saw wave going into B. And the whole output is duped and sent into each input on DDK. And the outputs are just left and right. Channel 1 on DDK is being triggered by the gates coming from the sequence. And channel 2 on the right side of DDK is being triggered by those gates going into a clock multiplier ratchet controller and CV controlling those ratchets, and it just trying to keep the beat with the sequence not being exactly on beat. And you could trace out the rest of the things in here. And in a separate patch here, I routed the piano to the Wavefolder by splitting it and routing it into audio A and the phase audio in B. And that's it for this video on FM Sinus Lab and DDK by Blue Lantern Modules.